What's up, guys? Jeff and Alyssa here.
Oh, I didn't get to say my name.
Okay, let's try that one more time. What's up, guys? I'm Jeff.
I'm Alyssa.
Welcome back to the Real Life Podcast. We got a special episode for you today. First of all, we like to jump right into it, but I will say, man, it was... do you guys ever have those days where you're tired, but it was fulfilling? I don't get to work with my hands that often, but today got to do that by installing new flooring in our garage. And Alyssa got to paint. So we were both, guys, we're usually talkers and typers. Today we were
You still type.
painters and installers. Yeah, today was a long day, guys.
Yeah.
Got up at 4, worked on my next book edits. We chose the final cover of the next book. The book comes out in October. You probably won't kind of see anything legitimate on it for a couple months. That's how that schedule works. But I'm excited for it. Did all that. Got up early, worked on edits. Then I picked the cover later in the day. Then worked on installing new flooring in the garage all day. Then went 45 minutes away and picked up a couch with a buddy of mine during dinner. So it was a long day. And now we're doing this. So we're still working. I've been up since 4 and I'm grinding. Hashtag no sleep. Hashtag joking because I don't believe in that gospel. It's a false gospel. Galatians. That's what Paul was talking about.
I'm going to cut you off there. We're just a little, what do you call that?
Slap happy, loopy,
Yes.
tired, need coffee. Oh, guys, we have an espresso machine on the way in the mail. And about to make some shots. Double shots. Okay, we're just going to jump right into it.
We're also thinking of making our own oat milk.
Oh,
So
yeah,
if
that's
you've
duck soup,
tried
though.
it, let us know.
Yeah. And if you guys don't know, duck soup is a phrase in Hawaii. No one really uses it anymore. It's an old phrase. But it just
No one
means
uses it anymore?
No, I don't hear anyone say it. But it just means easy. So apparently duck soup must have been easy to make. That's why I'm guessing the etymology of that phrase. Because now when something's easy, you just say, oh, brah, duck soup. But no one says that anymore. Like I said, it's an old pigeon adage or little verb or phrase or whatever that word is.
Well,
But yes,
what are we talking about today, babe?
if anyone's made their
It's
own
a
oat milk.
surprise to me, too. Oh, okay. Well, the reason why I want oat milk is because when I was pregnant, we went to Portland and I got this latte. It was, when was that? Summer?
Yeah, Barista, which if you guys
At
in Portland, it's a great
Barista,
coffee
it was
shop.
an oatmeal cookie latte, guys.
And they used oat milk, so it even was
I
really
still
true.
dream about it. I wish I knew all the things they put in it. It was literally the best latte I've ever had. So maybe we can recreate it.
Yes, totally.
Okay, so what's the topic today?
Family size. We're going to talk about family size. We're going to do this in reverse, guys. Usually we'll do podcasts, and then I'll take the podcast to Instagram, and people will have a fun conversation a couple weeks later on Instagram. This one is the reverse, where I posted a kind of a Jeff Dad Thoughts. If you don't know that hashtag, it's like a hashtag I've done over the last couple of years, where I try to post more hopefully unique or creative thoughts on fatherhood and parenting to get people thinking and get a conversation going. And one of the Jeff Dad Thoughts was about family size. And I just talked about a couple of the ways I think we think through that question improperly or in an unhealthy way or a trajectory that takes us in a bad place. And it was a really fun conversation. I can always usually tell an Instagram is a really fun, kind of more on fire conversation, meaning I really enjoy it and I think it's really good discussion when it gets over maybe 90 to 100 comments. And I think this one was 180 or 200 or something. So this was a really fun conversation to have with you guys. And you can go find that on the hashtag Jeff Dad's Thoughts, Jeff's Dad Thoughts. Probably 1 or 2 posts back once you're listening to this. But I wanted to because of the discussion, I actually want to spend more time on that then rather than just a caption. So whether you're single, married, I do think it's a relevant conversation, but obviously this one will be a little bit more particular to people in families and with kids. But yeah, because I do think in our stage with toddlers and everyone, even if you want kids or don't have kids or maybe whatever, that's the question you first get usually right when you get married. And so you're kind of forced upon thinking about this question.
I feel like you asked that question even in elementary school. Remember? Okay, maybe kids don't do this anymore, but remember, did you ever do this when you played MASH? People, MASH or MASH Co. And you put the 3 boy names of the guys that you could marry. Then the next one was how many kids are you going to have? Where are you going to live? What's your job going to be like? Are you going to live in a condo, an outhouse, a mansion? Do you remember doing that? Okay, maybe that's just the girls. Anyway, if you're a girl, I feel like this is a topic you've been talking about for your whole life.
That is funny.
At least if you're in my generation.
That's fair.
Okay.
So I'm going to pull it back up, guys, and I'll just read a quick summary. So essentially what I want to talk about is I want to talk about the 2 things that I talked about, and then we can kind of bounce back and forth on that. And then there were some really good, I'd say there's probably 2 or 3 good honest questions then around this idea, like kind of what if or what about. And so we'll talk about our 2 reasons and then those 3 kind of, I think, questions and dialogues that were really fun to have with you guys. And so, yeah, and I think it's something you have to be thinking about. Like Alyssa said, whether even in elementary, whether it's right when you get married, it's forced upon you. Now, let me just start with the absolute 100% caveat that this conversation is like, we don't create our own future. Mm-hmm. So that's like, I hope that's given. I hope that's granted. We're going to have the conversation based on those terms. So you can still talk about these things and think about these things. But I just want to say, without a shadow of a doubt, God is sovereign. He's the creator of life. He works in complex, mysterious ways. We also are still under a curse in a lot of regards. He works through that curse to bring new creation and blessing. He's mysterious and crazy and different and unique and fresh, and our plans aren't his plans. That should all go without being said, but I said it. So that's like, we're not like in this conversation. It's not like, oh, what's the perfect family size? Now just go do it. That's not how this works. But we should be asking ourselves questions and be planning intentionally. Mm-hmm. Just like what God has for us in our team and our mission. Mm-hmm. So the 2 ideas that I said I think are kind of problematic is this. And the first one is to make any family size decision, meaning how many kids we think we should have based on the idea that the kids are consumption vehicles instead of contribution vehicles. And what I said on Instagram was, children in the past tended to be seen as blessings that would actually expand your family's capacity for creating and contributing. Think more kids equals more help in the family trade or the family farm. But the narrative started to shift the more our entire culture started leaning from contribution to consumerism, which was around early 1900s. This can be traced, secular, religious, whoever's studying it. All sociologists agree that we leaned heavy consumerist the minute, kind of right at the turn of that century. Now, we subtly can believe the lie that each new kid added to the team can just now suck more life and resources and assets and time and energy from us rather than give it. So then we choose to not have more because that sounds like more draining. We don't say it out loud, but it's easy to feel this in our hearts. We believe kids don't primarily give us something. We believe they primarily take something from us.
Can I interrupt real quick?
Well, you're not interrupting. That was the last sentence, and I was going to say, take it from here, babe.
Well, no, I wanted you to hear if you want to expand on that. But I think part of it too, because I don't know history very well, so at the turn of the century, but even like, I feel like, what was I going to say?
You got it.
My brain.
Turn of the century.
Part of it, like I was just talking to my parents a couple weeks ago, and they were saying, I think it was when, you know how, like, is it generations, they kind of swing to certain things? So, like, when they were growing up, it was like the kids couldn't talk. You kind of had to be silent, like, unless if you were spoken to kind of thing.
Seen, not heard.
Seen, not heard.
Seen, not heard, or whatever that
and then
was,
when they had kids, so when I was a kid, then the culture really shifted to a child-centered home, which obviously brings a lot of consequences, and like it just isn't the best. That's not what God wanted. Like, we're not supposed to have a child-centered home. And so, but I think within that, then with the child-centered home, it would make sense why kids are a consumption consumption. And I think part of it, like I grew up, I feel like with the lie that like, oh, we shouldn't, I don't know, maybe it was like real subtle, or maybe I just somehow picked up on it, and I don't know why I did, but just like we should be like pouring into our kids and giving them the best opportunities. And, you don't have kids to like help you work on the farm. That's like wrong. And we should be, you know what I mean?
Yes,
However you say that, like I just kind of had this thing like, oh, we should never ask our kids to do those things. They should let them be kids. And so I think in a way, yes, of course, let them be kids. But then I think we lost that whole thing of, hey, we're a family, and the family, we need each other. We are on mission together. We have a job to do, whatever your job and mission is as a family. And so then I think we somehow lost that, like, oh, kids are a blessing and God gives them to us to fulfill the mission he's calling us on. And it turned into a child-centered home, and kind of just like, well, and the nesting idea, and like sending our kids out and be individual and do the best that they can do. You know what I mean? And so I think even at the turn of the century, but yes, even just like, I feel like when I was growing up, that was all kind of in the, you're just staring at me.
No, I agree. Keep going.
In the mix. And I could even see, like, growing up, that was the lie I kind of believe. Like, if I have children, it would never be to work on the farm, like to have more workers. It would be to like be able to disciple them and raise them up. But somehow both can be true. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I think that's actually a point I wasn't thinking of that I think is warranted of talking about is like, and this has been shown with like the helicopter parenting generation and us just being obsessed. You know, it's kind of a mixed bag of like us wanting to have the best for our kid, but a lot of us, it's actually us putting our own idols and burdens on our kid for them to be perfect so that we feel better about ourselves. But there is like, we are in a culture that just does more for the kids than ever. Like ever. Like we are obsessed with our kids. Right. And I think in a wrong way, in a bad way, like that 100 years, I wasn't thinking about this line of thinking, but I think you're right that like, 100 years ago, you could have 10 kids and it wasn't that hard because you had 10 kids and then they just like went outside and played or like, that was it.
Well, even my dad,
you know what I mean? Like, it's just kind of like
all the time.
Yeah. Your dad has crazy stories about him going like on random walks when he's 5 years old, he far away and like, you know.
He went on his first date when he was 5. He
didn't go on his first date, but
no, he did. He took a girl to the movies. Well, no, it was 25 cents.
I think that's your dad being a little.
No, that's for real. When he was 5 years old.
Okay, but either way, that proves the point of like he
would leave at like 7 a.m. and come back at 5.
Yeah. The reason we're burnt out, a lot of us are burnt out parenting is because we spend every waking hour and minute trying to do absolutely almost impossible standards for our kids. The best education, the best food, the best thought process, the best tutoring, the best clothes, the best way to walk on their feet so they don't get plantar fasciitis when they're 27, the best muscle to press on so they don't develop arthritis. Like it's just literally we obsess about every little issue for our kids. And I'm like, people just didn't do that back then, right?
No, they didn't.
So that's now.
But I mean, in a way, I think our parenting.
Well, as I say, I think the pendulum
we're much
swings.
more intentional.
That's what I was just going to say. But I one thing I'll never do, even though we talk about the past a lot, is romanticize it. There's also certainly a level of like there was not very that some, not all, that some parents had no intimacy with their kids, no like intentionality. They didn't know their kids' hearts. And I think that's wrong. So I think if we can land somewhere in the middle of like not expecting our kids to be super children, but then and also trusting that like, man, they are, I think here's another way to put it. I think where it does get wrong for our generation, we do need to be intimate with them, love them, have a relationship with them, be about their hearts, shepherd their hearts. Where it gets wrong for us is where we feel incumbent or burdened to entertain them. I mean, like it's our job to always make sure that every minute of their waking hour is filled with something. That's problematic. Right? Because we do that with sports. We do that with entertainment, whether that's screens. We do that with all these different things where we feel that we have some enormous responsibility to somehow fill their void time, right? I'm like, no. It's like, no, you're bored? Then you're bored, right? You have nothing to play with? Well, then you actually have zero imagination because there's a ton right out there in the backyard, right? Like there's a million, like that game I actually think is real bad about our culture, right? Of like that you are responsible and no wonder we're burnt out because you got you have 2 kids and you're trying to do that. You're trying to fill every waking hour with something special and spectacular and awesome and crafty and beautiful. And if you want to do that and you actually doesn't burn you out, then I think you actually totally should. And you probably have a gift for that. So invite people over and let other kids come into it. But a lot of us, that's too much. I think
even like, yes. And even on like a Alyssa level, I'll say that. I think sometimes I've caught myself where I'll be up at night on Pinterest and see all these cute crafts or all these toddler activities and feel like, okay, the next day what am I going to do with the kids? And I really have a heart to be intentional with them, to spend time with them. Like that's a huge priority to me. But I can get in this.
But that's different though than.
Yes. But sometimes I can go a little wayward when then I'm like, okay, I need to plan out this whole activity. I need to have it look Pinterest perfect. Yeah. And like for me, I know when I'm being, the heart of it has been lost and it's more about perfectionism or having it all planned out or whatever. And so I think sometimes that, I just have to constantly check my heart and like I can plan a little activity, but then let them be creative with it. It doesn't have to look like a Pinterest. It never looks like what it is on Pinterest. Or like the last couple of days we've been working on.
What did you say the other day? You were like, I saw it on Pinterest. It's easy. And I said famous last words. I was like, can't you just build
a Murphy bed? I saw it on Pinterest. It looked pretty easy.
And I said famous last words that pretty much everyone has died from.
And that's really fun and special, but I'm learning, and maybe it's just the kids' age too, but the last few days we've been working on our garage and the kids have been out there and they've just been playing with their, so imaginative.
Yeah, and playing with the trash I'm creating and the wrappers from the floor and
it's been so fun watching them and then to be a part of it, like to ask questions, like to go to the store with them. What are you going to buy here? Like, that is, I think, what am I trying to say? I think sometimes when we go online and try to like recreate something, we lose the magic of just letting their imaginations run wild and just having creative play with them. Yeah. We don't have to have a whole schedule or planned out, but we can just kind of enter their world. And obviously when they get into school, that's different. Like you need to have more planning things, but that's just like a...
No, it's true. And guys, like, and well, what's cool is I think we try to. I think we try to do this well, or at least we shoot for it, where we definitely don't take the philosophy of, trying to entertain every minute for them, but we also don't take the philosophy of like, oh, you go entertain yourself, goodbye, don't be around me. Mm-hmm. I think we actually really like hanging out together as a family, and then specifically doing stuff with them, but you kind of welcome them leading it and making sure and setting a low bar of like.
Well, I think because I've just learned it goes so much better when.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm saying. Like for example, today, I bought 500 square feet of flooring, so that's whatever 250 pieces. And they're, 99 cents a piece. So to me, I was like, okay, it's worth $1 for me to take one piece, or I did this yesterday, to take one piece, give it to Kinsley, give her a pencil, and give her a tape measure, and just kind of say, like, do whatever you want. And she, for a long time, kind of pretended like she was working with me and measuring it and drawing lines. And she was like, and it was, first of all, I thought it was hilarious. It's cute. And I'm like, man, that was that. Like, I wasn't some special toy that I got from Toys R Us. It was like extra piece of flooring for 99 cents. But it kind of included her in it. We're doing it. And so like we try to always intentionally think like that. Family size though. Okay. So, but I think that one matters. I think that little conversation, I like where that went for a second, because I think that matters, because then it does, because then adding another child to our level of parenting perfection we're trying to do does make us like a lot of suffocate and pressure.
Yeah.
When you're adding it to the team. And in some sense, and this exposes, by the way, if we're a collection of individuals or if we're a team, because any baseball team I've ever played on, adding one more person only helped the team. Only helped the team. No one goes, oh my goodness, all our assets and our resources and our talent is just going to be drained. You're like, oh man, I'm so glad we got a better pitcher. Like we have another pitcher now. We have another person that can play left field, right? Maybe there's some things you have to work with emotionally with someone bringing on the team, like, oh man, I might have to sit on the bench more or whatever. But in general, from like a resources and a draining standpoint, no one does that. You feel most drained on a sports team when it starts dwindling and when people get injured. That's fascinating, right?
Yeah.
So it kind of shows you we're a collection of individuals, because only a collection of individuals gets really upset when they have to share resources, assets, and energy. Teams don't. They want more, because then that actually can help the team.
Yeah.
So that's really, really important.
Go ahead.
No, yeah.
Can I play devil's advocate?
Or not yet. Maybe. We're like 20 minutes in, and we're on our first point still. So.
Oh, okay. Go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead.
We can go to the second point. I can bring it up later.
Go ahead.
Just a couple questions I was thinking of. What if like financially you can't afford
that was one
more
of the
children?
Ones, yeah.
And then also as a mom, like what if you feel like you couldn't add another because you want to be really intentional with your kids, and like one more would just be too much?
Yeah. Okay, so let's talk about that then. So the three things, and by the way, I also don't love when I think specifically religious families usually make this blanketed statement of like bigger families better. I think that's not helpful either. I think like here's what we'll explicitly say, and we'll be as clear as possible. I think God has a specific team size for you and your marriage, your family. Like if you're a couple or whatever, whoever's listening. And that's not the same as your neighbor or your friends. He has a specific team size in mind for you. That could be no kids, 1 kid, 8 kids. I don't know. It could be adopted kids. It could be biological kids. It could be foster kids. It could be spiritual kids in the sense of like mentoring and shepherding people in your community. But the question is, what I want to be crystal clear in is, we do a huge disservice, and I think we lose out on a lot of joy and a lot of intimacy with the Lord when we don't let him take us to the team he wants us to take us, because we're operating and making decisions primarily based on consumption, the first one I said, and then the second one is fear. Meaning like, oh, he can't do it. He can't handle it, or I can't handle it, or we can't do it. Which thus then usually means we think the Lord can't do it. So that's what we're saying. I just want that's the thesis of our family size theology. Of I actually don't like when people say it's a certain amount. That's dumb, that's unhelpful, that's unhealthy. But I do think some families are getting those tubes tied a little too early. I do think they're getting whatever the thing snipped a little too early, right? Because they're operating, and doing that is not meaning you're operating out of fear, but I think a lot of us jump to really permanent solutions based on fear or consumption, rather than going very, very, very slow and making sure the Lord is taking us down that direction. I totally think the Lord can command you and you can live in obedience towards those directions of him saying like, yeah, you're done.
Or especially if there's a health issue or something
and we know,
like that.
yeah, and that's obviously an outlier for sure. But I'm just saying, I think it bums me out because I do think because of, this is one issue I just want to be really careful with people on, because it's hard to not be like, man, and it's easy to see how we all operate in this, but man, do we realize how much of a blessing a child is? Do we realize how much just one more is a gift from the very heart of God to bless our team and the world in the city we live in? And how many of us are maybe not, how many of us because fear blocks imagination. You can't be fearful and imaginative, I feel like, at the same time. And so when you're living in fear, you can't even imagine the future God has for you. You can't even imagine to live in that future. Now, that's different than, again, if he just says, I think, if you have one kid and you feel in your heart by the Spirit of God, like, hey, we're done. This is our team. That's chill. That's what it is. But I do think a lot of us go very fast down permanent solutions, or just blocking that because we're making decisions based out of fear, which is unhealthy, or consumption rather than contribution, which seems to be more the discipleship model that Jesus lays out in the scriptures, etc. So does that make sense?
Yes, that's good.
So let's just
well said.
Yeah, so that's boom. That's the thesis. That's the center. Now, I think there is some nuances. Now, well, that was nuance, hopefully, but there's more nuances. One thing I would say is, yeah, the cost one is certainly up there. But one thing I'll say that's been really, I struggle with this one because I don't know anyone who could have grown up poorer than me, and we still had a couple. You know what I mean? So I don't know. And if Mom, you're listening, my mom's a saint. She's awesome. But yeah, we growing up, it was food stamps, Section 8 housing. I don't know because I was a kid, but I'm guessing that probably put us borderline homeless a couple times. Texting Mom if I'm right. Moving a lot, all free lunches at the schools. Literally, we were just very, very poor. But yet, by the providence of God, we got by, and community specifically, that's what's cool is, man, the Lord was so providential in people that he surrounded us with that helped us and took care of us. But money is an issue. But one thing I'll say that really, I think in general, you have to just be wise with it. One thing that I heard that I think is really helpful is, kids aren't expensive, lifestyles are expensive. Because I think we think kids are really, really, really expensive. They're not. It's really, really, really expensive? Having to get that new baby swing every time you have a baby. It's really expensive having to get, all these, X diapers and clothes and onesies and that cool little new thing that comes with an app that allows you to rock your baby to sleep. That's expensive. The baby is not expensive. To me, I just really struggle with that one because people are having babies literally in the whole world, third world countries, right? And I've seen people, we've been to Uganda, and this is places where they live in huts, and there seems to be a level of joy, not necessarily that their quality of life shouldn't and couldn't be raised, and that we can help them and and that there can be initiatives that can help them in that, but you still see very strong, beautiful parental kid relationships. So I'm I don't, and usually bigger families. I don't know. So I just, that one I kind of struggle with, but there is, so I think lifestyles are expensive, not kids, but there is still wisdom in kids are another cost and another thing and another stuff like that. So I don't know exactly how to answer that one. I just think sometimes we use that reason when
I think it can be something to check your do you thoughts about if you are in private school and you want to go to an Ivy League school and you want to put them in the special baseball and all these things, and you're I can't afford another child, then maybe do they need those things type of thing.
And I think too, it just kind of sometimes is hard too, because 100 years ago you could have these kids they were coming to actually help you make more money, be contributors on the farm, when now they do sap from us in some regard a little bit more financially. But then on top of that, we are also a country that's up to our eyeballs in debt. And we over leverage ourselves and we overspend ourselves and we live way above our means rather than way below our means. And so it's sad to me that usually we make the decision to over leverage ourselves and go into a ton of debt to get the house and the car, but we won't do that for a child. You know what I mean? Like that's an interesting thing to me that we like, that the minute it's like, oh, the child's too costly, we're good, but we're going to, be over here with debt in like, 7 different places. When I don't, it's just like, to me, that seems like a priority check. Yeah. And something that I would have to check with us, and like, and yeah, it's hard, man. We feel it. A baby starts coming and you're like, ooh, we got to get some things. We got to do some things. But I think it was really good for us with Lucy, even in a more financially strained season with Lucy, I would say that like, we had to like kind of be like, ooh, do we need that? Do we not need that? Can we get that? Can we borrow that? Can we Craigslist that for really cheap? Can we sell some things? Like, so there's a level there that's, yeah. The other one, overpopulation and stewardship of the earth. This one was funny because I started telling Alyssa that this is actually like a legitimate thing that people talk about, and she was like surprised.
I had no idea. It didn't even make sense to me.
Yeah, one thing I will say on this one, guys.
Explain it though for those that don't know, like me.
There is a stream of thought that would say, kind of like, how can you bring another kid into this world because of the problems of basically overpopulation, carbon emissions, our footprint, all that different thing. That kind of like we're gonna kind of kill the earth if we keep having a bunch of babies.
And I just said, isn't the birth rate like way down?
Yeah, so that's what's
like people are having less and less babies.
Yeah, so this one does seem to me actually like pretty unfounded, and even like a lot of secular people actually kind of put the brakes on that one and say like, yeah, it's like trendy because we're so green right now, and we're so and we should take care of the earth. We should be people who steward it. It's God's creation. What a beautiful gift. But I think that makes us then sometimes in culture, people that believe in that stuff because they're not coming from the right framework, then it just becomes trendy and we hop on every single green bandwagon. And one of those is like kids. And yeah, it's pretty unfounded. And even secular people have psychologists, sociologists, people have studied this and just said that like, yeah, we're not even close to that yet.
Yeah.
And there's a couple different things. There's one, it's funny that like no one says that in other parts of the world. And what I'm saying with that is like, what is America? I think America is like 12% of the world's population, but we drain like 60 or 50% of the world's resources.
Wow.
So like we are just like gorging ourselves in this country on energy and on, the carbon footprint and all these different things. And so it's really not a world that's like, it's really actually a stewardship issue and a resource issue, not like we have enough. We have enough in this world for plenty more people. We have enough space in this world for plenty more people. It's just, there's a select few, usually the white, rich countries that are disproportionately hurting the earth because of their beliefs and their value systems. And to me, that's interesting because if it was an overpopulation issue, then it'd be the whole world would have the problem when it's kind of more just in a very select few areas, usually affluent elite. And so, yeah, that's not a huge deal. One thing I would say, though, too, that's interesting about that is, like you said, the birth rate, like the fertility rate's actually down lower than it ever has been in a while. So we're actually not even like as a whole, even if you overpopulate with like 5 kids, like we're not, the country isn't, and the world isn't. Another one is like Japan is a fascinating case study on the flip side of this, where Japan actually has one of the lowest fertility rates in the world. And they're actually at the point where they show you how this plays out, and it doesn't play out well.
Aren't they only allowed to have 1 or 2 babies per
China.
family?
But
it's Japan.
They just like...
They're just not having babies?
No, they'll actually pay you there in a couple different cities to have it because it's...
To have a baby?
Yeah. And like they'll pay for your daycare, they'll pay for the kids' school because they want... And here's why, guys. There's actually an enormous economic impact when you don't. And what I'm saying, like here's one thing. There's a bunch of old people in Japan right now that have no one to take care of them. And that's an enormous $1 billion cost on the country. Right?
Yeah.
Because what's the normal way that you actually take care of old people? The family. Normal. Now, of course, there's hospitals and hospice and all that, but the normal way is like younger people take care of the older people.
Yeah.
But guys, you can Google this. This is an actual enormous problem of old people basically just dying alone, an enormous burden on the actual healthcare of the country, and just the economic output that's affecting with also young people and workers and manufacturing. It's actually like eroding the country, and it's a severe problem for them. And so that's also just one thing too. This isn't just like let's have less kids and the earth's just going to be a lot better. Yeah, Japan's about 20 years ahead of us on that, and it's not going well. It's not going well. So that's what I would say on that. Man, I got lots more, but this is like a half an hour, and we like to keep it within
we could do 2 parts.
Part 1 and part 2. Maybe we will. Here's the thing though, guys. Whatever you thought, go on that Instagram post. We can keep that post going. # Jeff's dad thoughts. And just, it's like 1 or 2 posts back. It's a picture of just Lucy's face looking up on a towel. And comment and let us know what you thought. But yeah, any final thoughts about family size, the questions we were asking, the things you should be thinking through?
I think the main takeaway that we're getting at is, the main thing is that children are a blessing. And do we really believe that? Or do we have fear when it comes to having a family? Or is there things in our past or how our family was that makes us fearful of having families, or we need healing from, or misguided thoughts about family? Just to really check our heart. And then I think just what you said, like, I think on the flip side, there's a lot of us that really desire children and really desire big families or bigger families than what we have. And a lot of us aren't able to have those kids from whatever, maybe miscarriages, or you're not able to get pregnant, or you're not married, or whatever it could be. And so just hearing our hearts behind that, like the Lord sees that, and that's not what we're talking about. We're just talking about like maybe more the heart motivation and the thinking behind having children, and that God loves the desire that you want children, and they really are just like the biggest blessing. And I think even if you don't have children, having, like you said, spiritual children, like our Jeff's aunt and uncle, which actually isn't even his aunt and uncle, it's just kind of like she kind of almost adopted Jeff when he was little and was really good friends with his mom, and has just been a huge blessing in our lives. She got married later on in life and didn't have any children, but man, like Jeff is like her child in a way. And like she has, I think so much of why Jeff is the way he is not only from his mom, but also from this aunt and just the years she prayed for him, and so many others. And so I just think that is such a blessing. And I love seeing that in the kingdom of God. Like, that's God's heart, whether we have biological children or whatever your family looks like to just raise disciples and pour into people, and children are a blessing. So to see it like that.
Totally. So that's what we'll end with, you guys, is wherever you're at, God has a vision for your team. This is what we're trying to say. God has a vision for your team. Are you living in his vision? Are you being informed by culture, by unhealthy ideals and values? Because that's another thing too, is don't shoot for this ideal family size. Shoot for God's heart for your team. And that can mean 0,
and it could change
1,
the years.
8. Yes, and it flexes and it changes.
And have an open hand.
And there's surprises. You can think it's this, and then all of a sudden you're pregnant, or you can think it's this, and then all of a sudden it's really hard to get pregnant. And then he's taking you down a particular path
to foster care later on in life, or adoption, whatever it looks like.
So God has a vision for your team. And so many times I think we let the web of cultural lies inform our decision on that. And we're just saying, make sure that you're really shooting for God's vision, living in it, because that's when your team will flourish the most. That's when you will flourish the most, and that's what will be the most blessing. So we love you guys. Have a great week.